All right.
Welcome.
Welcome. Yeah. So this is the trans topic. It's getting wild out there. It's
Yes,
getting pretty crazy. I
there
mean, it's
is
been getting
something.
crazy for a while though, right?
Yeah, there's something to talk about like every day. Unfortunately, with the trans issue, I wish it would go away, but it's not. So we should talk about what's going on.
I don't think that the trans topic is going to go away anytime soon. Um, Largely because I think that the trans topic touches virtually every aspect of society. I think
What if I cross my fingers harder?
you could give it a shot, but no guarantees. I don't think it's gonna happen. Maybe if we all cross our fingers, then maybe. But
Yeah.
even then, it's. I think it's I think it like because when you start talking about logic, and like how it works. So like one of the aspects of it that I'm kind of almost waiting to happen is when the trans topic comes into contact of in effect societally with the non-binary, because those are two mutually
Right.
exclusive um, concepts and ideas and
So
schools of thought in a
that
sense
is,
that do
it's
not
very
match
true,
together.
and I have heard a couple of people mention that, but I mean, most not very often, because it's an intricate thing. The problem is that they don't care about anything but the community of queerness. Ultimately, they have queer in common, and that is an embraced type of idea and term. I'm not slandering anything.
Sure.
Um, like they embrace queerness together, and I think that's a unifying thing, and everything else doesn't matter. I don't think they're gonna ever collide.
I
Like women
disagree.
and trans women will collide because you actually invade
Sure.
upon women's spaces that are there for a reason to protect
Sure.
women so they can have different environments. And so I just don't see how binary and the trans issue, even though they are diametrically opposed as you are suggesting,
Hmm.
I just
Like how
think that they
what's
care
the
about the
context
queerness
that
and
they
that's
would.
how, and community, and that's it. I think they're unified in that, and that's all that matters.
um I don't think so because what if you look at what the non-binary is really pushing for, because they're basically pushing a school of thought and the same kind of thing to some degree for the trans, and then acceptability and like acceptance is kind of a driving force. And so you'll have people who will in effect go out of their way to ensure that you are accepting of them and their internal interpretation of the world. And so at some point, I think that those are going to kind of collide. And so you have, I mean, in effect, like the two schools is basically you have one that's the non-binary, yeah,
I'm
one that's
crossing
the
my fingers
non-binary.
that happens because if you if you have them against them, they have to
Figure out the
respect each other in some
resolution.
way and actually have the argument, as opposed to
Yeah,
us being dismissed completely. So crossing my fingers that that would happen. I just don't think that will. I think they'll avoid it completely.
I don't think that they're going to be able to. It's because I think that the society is going to the demands are going to be pushed so hard. Like right now, it's the time of the trans. Like that's the focus of everything. Right before it was all the gay stuff, and it was like, hey, recognize us, be okay with us, let us do what we want. And then it's like, okay, once they got everything that effect in effect that they wanted, it was like, all right, now we're moving on to the trans. And so then the trans kind of now we're in the trans phase. And then once the trans phase resolves, it's going to be the non-binary, but then it's going to be like the trans eventually kind of like how there's the LGB is now kind of like acting to remove the T. They're trying to remove the
Yeah.
trans from it. And that makes sense because they're two completely different aspects. They shouldn't be lumped together. Like they operate and function off of like one is purely just sexuality and who you're attracted to. It's attractiveness, and all of that. But the trans is doesn't have anything to do with who
Yeah.
you're attracted to. It has to do with who you view yourself as biologically internally, right? That's the whole trans concept. But with the non-binary is like, well, who you are in your head is, it's whatever you want it to be. It's a social construct. You can be anything that you want to be.
Yep.
You're not constrained to anything. But if you have that concept, then you're specifically denying the legitimacy of the trans identity, right? Because the trans, they operate off of a binary. That's how they operate. Um, because if you feel as though you are biologically somebody else, then you're going to be doing whatever you can to imitate that as much as you
So
can.
how do you suspect these things would collide? Like, what practical thing would happen to make them, like, when you're dealing with women's issues
Mm-hmm.
and the trans situation, and then they combine with women, and they're going to face off on women's sports, face off in locker rooms, and there is a situation in which they're kind of forced together to try to figure it out at some point. I don't
Biology
see what that
comes
is.
into play, right? Biology comes into play when you're talking with trans, and that's where the conflict kind of ends up. Well, because you have the sports, you have bathrooms, you have locker rooms, you have um, what are they, the safe houses for battered women kind of things. There's scholarships. There's all kinds of aspects of things where certain groups of people are afforded certain extra privileges based off of the sex that they are. I think you're right to a large degree that the non-binary is not a it doesn't necessarily touch on the biological aspect of things, but I think there can be things where people can be like, hey, you know what, I'm non-binary and I can fluctuate between, like, my gender is fluid, so maybe I want to go into the women's bathroom, maybe I want to go into the men's bathroom. I can do what I want to do.
Maybe cause dissension in the ranks, because someone would say, hey, I fought for my right to be in this other bathroom, and someone else just willy-nilly does it, whichever one they want. So I guess there could be something there.
Yeah, but I think that the main way that it's probably going to insert itself is mostly just through the acceptance, and then having all of those things, like the pronoun usage. The pronoun usage is going to be a big thing, and you're going to need to push. That's what they're going to be pushing.
So I guess if we assume that they win, like they did, pushing other agendas up to this point, and they get to a place where they're not fighting against us anymore, then maybe they're going to fight against themselves. But I think that's too late. I think we need to stop that from happening. I think that hopefully we will win with the kid angle with all this, to try to pry them away from.
Well, I think the kid angle is I think it's a very temporary one, and I think it's a losing battle for them. When it comes to, like, I mean, I didn't even think that drag queens would even get roped into this a while ago. It was kind of like, hey, the drag queens, they're cool. Let them do what they want to do. They're just, they're out there doing their fun thing for adult entertainment. Hey, have at it.
I think what's going to happen is we're going to win the sexualized children fight, and then on top of that, I think as we win that succinctly, I think we're going to be able to use the whole sexualized in public kind of arm of that in general to push back a little bit. It's like you have pride parades where they're doing simulated sex.
They're so crazy now.
And being penises up on the penis parades and things. It's like, it's one thing to have a different type of lifestyle. It's another thing to present yourself like that to the public
Yeah.
and to kids and stuff. So I think there's a possibility that as we decimate them on the kid issue over time here, that we can maybe use part of that arm to swing over and attack with the sexualized in public thing. Alone, it's not enough, but I think the kids are enough to push it there. So
Yeah,
we're not going to stop people from being trans, but what we can try to do is win. So Simple says that they are eliminating themselves if they are
yeah.
doing puberty blockers and they are no longer fertile.
Okay, so
In
this
a
actually,
generation, they're gone.
yeah. So this is actually probably a good segue into my hot topic, my
Okay.
hot take.
Something you've been holding on to.
This is something I've been holding on
insert
to
somewhere.
And okay, so I know you don't. I know. Okay, I'll build it up, so you'll kind of have to follow the story because I don't want to just say the end thing, because I think that just saying the end thing can just kind of garner a reaction, and then it's just like that's all that I'm left with is just a reaction, and then nobody would care about whatever I said.
So.
Set up to it.
There's different styles. As long as it's not too long and convoluted and people can get where you're going, it's fine to explain it ahead of time.
Yeah. So
but sometimes it's good to have a punchline and then you explain your way to it. Depends on how radical it is.
Well, I think when you were talking about this kind of a topic, I don't want to just be like, hey, this is what I think. And then it's like, okay, next video, or like, I don't want to hear anything that this guy has to say because it's so wild. But it is a hot take. So the kind of story, the way that it kind of goes is like I was sitting there and I was watching these. It was like this. I saw it on Twitter, and it was just like a whole bunch of clips and videos of effectively detransitioners, right? And they're talking about what they went through, how they got there, and like just all of the aspects and the angles that led them into falsely believing that they were trans, right? A lot of it had to do with their social circles. A lot of it had to do, many of them even cited their autism. There was a lot of different things, sexual or childhood trauma or abuse, or just generally kind of confusion kind of going on, and seeking acceptance. And these were kind of coming from people who are now in their they're maybe 23, 24, 25, 30-ish years old at this point. And it took them. So basically from one of the primary stats was, I think it's like 6 to 8 years. So from the time that someone decides that they're transgender to the point that they figure out and learn that they are not actually transgender is between 6 and 8 years. So it's a long process for them to have to go through this. Now, what our society is kind of having up for debate for the most part is it's kind of where do we start? What are we allowing for, and what are we tolerating for? At what age? And that age starts off with like, okay, that's basically like 12 years old, because that's when you would have to introduce puberty blockers.
Yeah.
Now, to be honest, I don't know that many people, and I talked to many people who are pro-trans, but even they are not in favor of giving kids puberty blockers. They're still not for it. And so there's a whole conversation in there with all of that. But I was just kind of accepting that somebody kind of does that. And then they kind of go through blah, blah, blah. And then they hit another age where it's like, okay, well, now we got to do hormone replacement therapy, right? So it's kind of like there's almost like if you were to kind of take each of these situations and kind of parse them out in making sure that you figure out if they actually are trans, well, that's going to take a long time. And even then, you have to consider all of these other the social pressures, the autism, you have to the childhood abuse, you have to, there's a lots of different things that you would have to consider of what could be attributing to them feeling though as though they are another gender. And a lot of things are, people don't want to, who have suffered maybe childhood trauma, they don't even want to be themselves. So effectively what they're
Right.
in a sense
They're
doing
trying to be
is,
another person.
I want to be somebody else, because if I'm somebody else, then I'm not the person who was traumatized as a child, right? And so all of this kind of stuff kind of takes a long time. So you could look at right now, the way that we are kind of looking at things is the way that the general society has kind of landed is to allow for transitions of any type, of any whatever, by the age of 18. So like at 18, if you want to take your HRT, take your HRT. If you want to get your cosmetic surgery done, get your cosmetic surgery done. If you want to get your double mastectomy, you can get your double mastectomy. If you want to get your genitals replaced with other genitals or whatever, then you can do that at the age of 18, right? But my position, after kind of considering a lot of this stuff, and especially the time that it takes for people to realize that they're transgender, is like, I would not be opposed to effectively making it so that people can't do this kind of stuff until they're like 25. Now, that's we don't have laws in place.
Yeah. There was a fellow, just a delivery driver that I encountered, a fellow delivery driver that I encountered from another company that said the exact same thing. He said, like, man, he was just randomly upset about the idea of the state being able to Washington State being able to basically take your kids away from you if you don't let them do trans stuff.
Yeah.
And he was upset. He's like, yeah, they shouldn't be allowed to do that till 25. Honestly, their brain isn't even set straight. And this is a guy that doesn't do politics at all. He's just a dude.
That was the other angle. That was the other point that I was kind of thinking of, was like, yeah, there's the brain development. Like I feel like the way it should kind of almost be is, because there is such a strong social element to it. Like, people should be able to go through the social circles, because social circles change as you age. You know, who you're friends with in your social circles when you're 13 years old are very different from when you're 16 years old, which are very different from when you're 18, right? Mm-hmm. And then you go off to college, and when you're like from 18 to 22,
it is amazing.
Like, you've got a completely different.
If you switch social circles, you might realize suddenly that this is not quite the direction I want to go, and maybe I'm just a gay guy or a gay woman or whatever. Yeah. And so they might just not do the hard surgery part and then just be happy in life. So
and so like it's kind of like, I kind of went like, okay, so 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20, 19, 18, right? So that's like 7 years, right? And it's like, so that means if you were 7,
you're going to the 6 to 8.
So now it's kind of like, okay, if you figured out that if you were like, I want to be trans, like I believe that I'm trans at 17 or 16, 15, 14 or whatever, but those years, I think they shouldn't even really be taken seriously, because you're a kid, right? And you're trying to figure things out, and you should understand that, like, most of what guides who you are as a child is the people who are around you and how it is that they interact with you and accept you. So what all these kids are effectively doing is they are seeking validation. They're trying to figure out, who is it that I am? Who do I need to be to fit in with everybody else? Right. I need to fit in, and how do I do that? And so if there's all these influences,
there are a very large group of people now that you can fit in with, because it is in the
and if you don't
more
fit
liberal areas, there is a large contingency of queer lifestyle people where they are
Right.
either trans or embracing of the whole trans idea in general.
Right. And if you don't fit in, then that's typically where you can fit in these, LGBTQ whatever kind of environments. Those are places that people can figure out how to, like, they will just generally be accepted so long as you're kind of like participating in that. And all you have to do is just kind of like talk to them, and they're basically telling you who you are or who you probably are. And so that gives you the endorphins or whatever to make you feel like you're being accepted. um and so it's kind of like, I feel like 25, because one of the things that was really sad to me was that, if you're to go through these processes, whether you're taking puberty blockers or HRT or getting surgeries, like, you are greatly diminishing your future possibilities of having the ability to build your own family, right? And so if you make that decision when you're 18, you're like, "Ooh, I'm so excited because I've been, since 13, I didn't know who I was, and I fell in with this community, and I love them, and they love me." And you go and go, and you're like, "But all I have to do is wait. All I have to do is
Yeah.
wait, and then I'll get that grand moment where I get to really truly be who I am." Right. And then 18 comes around, and boom, you just hit the ground running, and you're going through all this, and everything's exciting. And you go through and you get your uterus removed, and then they carve off all the skin on your arms, and then craft a you know they craft like I don't
Yeah,
even
a
want to call it a
phallus.
penis.
Yeah.
It's, a phallus, like a phallic object out of your arm's forearm skin. um and you go through this whole process, and then you kind of hit the real world, and you're like, "Oh, like, nobody's actually interested in that. Like, nobody
Right. It's
wants to
kind of like
be
the
with
high school
somebody
effect in
like that."
general, because like
Yeah.
there's a high school effect of when you leave, then all of a sudden who you are doesn't matter as much to the people that you are.
Yeah.
Like it used to matter. You used to have these things, and like you come and you are a thing too at school. You are a
Yeah.
certain character. You have a certain persona. You have a clique, and then you go out in the world and you're going to Safeway and you're going to whatever else and doing different things. No one cares, and all you are left with is the broken body, kind of.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
can't, and there's nothing you can do. So, like, by the time you're 20, you've gone through all of this stuff. Or if you're a man and you get the neo vagina, and it's like, "Oh, now what I have is like, no, I can no longer reproduce, and I have to dilate this thing every day in order to
Yeah.
prevent it from closing up." And then it just kind of like, and because if it closes up, it could create a bubble, which
Yeah.
enables infection, and there's all kinds of really crazy bad stuff, and you're effectively committed to um, a a lifetime, the rest of your entire life. You are now a medical patient, and you
Yep.
have to be able to afford all of this kind of care. And these are such harsh, like, end products that people don't understand what they're necessarily getting into, and they don't know the consequences. They don't know the consequences of any of this stuff. It's
Yeah.
like, you've just completely stripped away
So
you've diminished your level of who you can even build a life with. When you get these surgeries, you can't form your own family,
So is this radical idea
biologically at
is
least.
just the 25? Is that the
I
radical
guess
part
so.
about it?
Yeah. I mean, that's
Eh,
for me. I thought.
whatever. It's that's not gonna offend anybody more than anything else here.
Well,
It's
a lot of people, the few people that I've talked to was like, "What? No, it's got to
yeah,
be 18
yes.
because we let people,
It so
smoke at 18, and they can vote, and they can join the army, and like, these are the
right.
kinds of
So
rebuttals
you
I get."
shouldn't I don't think there should be a law per se, but what should exist in the medical system in general is certain standards and practices that actually audit people over periods of time for
Yeah.
mental health and things, and like in whether this is a thing they really want and for X amount of period of time.
But good luck getting
But
that
like
through.
what they do now is they just like you schedule your obligatory counseling session in which they basically sign off on you at the end of the 10-15 minutes counseling session. It's not a real there's no real challenge to self or anything or no questions. It's just making sure that that you're competent kind of in your decision. Are you sure? It's a hard decision.
And
It's
all
a
you have
big
to do is
decision.
just say, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
How many times do you have to
they
ask
just
me?
check. Yep.
All right, we'll get you your HRT. We'll get you scheduled for your double mastectomy. We'll get you ready. Okay, so it's two other little things that I want to try to point out is like, I think that there is a big difference between like legitimate, actual trans people and their opinion,
Mm-hmm.
and trans activists.
Yep.
And trans activists can believe that they are trans, but they probably aren't. Because the way I kind of almost look at it is like a legitimate trans person largely just kind of wants to be left alone. They want to live their life. They don't want to intrude on anybody else. And they just kind of want to be able to, they want to do the very best that they can to convince other people that they are the
Yes.
gender, the sex that they appear to be.
Yeah.
That's all that they really want to do.
Yeah, that's true. And then the activist people are interested in much more than that. They're looking to cause a ruckus. So I've always been on board with individuals that want to make life choices that I think are like, I don't know why they would ever do it.
But you can do it.
Like there is a fella that probably is referred to as a girl. I have no idea, because I never asked him and I don't know him. At a place I deliver, a big institution that I deliver, and he wears dresses and wears lipstick and he almost looks like he's just doing drag, because
cross-dressing.
he doesn't do effeminate things. He doesn't it's just does normal stuff, but he's wearing a dress and he's wearing makeup and sometimes he'll have like a pink glass he's drinking out of or something like that. So I see people like that and he's seemingly sane. Like he's not like
generally
people
normal,
like that. I'm like, okay,
a normal interaction.
People like that, it's like, okay, it's not like he's dealing with customers at a front desk. He's in a big institution working in an office somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Do what you want. It does become an issue, obviously, if you're a front-facing person and the business doesn't want to make a statement either way, and then it does make a statement if you have somebody doing that, whether you are on board or not. It's an issue. So yes, I have no problem with people making, in my opinion, poor choices, but they have the freedom to do so. I have no problem with that. I don't want to treat people badly. I just don't like the activist situation where they are pushing so hard as to even be as bold as to think that children are not off limits. And that's going to be
I think that there should maybe be more of a conversation of like, when is the appropriate time to go through transition? Like 25. Like you should do it later in life.
The problem I have with that,
it's just safer.
Even though I agree with the reasonings for your argument, I think that we're, by even having that conversation, that we concede the idea that it is something that, like, okay, this is an acceptable path forward. Like, this is I don't like the idea that it adds some level of legitimacy to the process. That's the only problem I have with it.
Well,
but I get it. I get it. What I mean is like
if we're going to acknowledge that legitimate trans people do exist,
Yeah. Oh, they.
right? And
Yeah.
that there are those people who actually are happy and who actually are happy. Hold on, just wanted to write something down real quick. Who are happy actually going through the the transition, right? Then
Yeah.
there has to be a process for that.
You're
And so the
correct.
conversation, I think, has to happen at some point on some level.
So I was just going through an exercise that I remember about not all the time. That was a word salad there. So like it's a Rush Limbaugh idea of question the premise, or like don't accept a certain premise, or like, or don't
Sure.
concede ground by talking about. So maybe it didn't fully apply there, and maybe you're correct, but that was more of a me trying to challenge based upon that principle. So
Sure. So the other point that I wanted to make is something that I think that we should do um, as a society is to promote the idea of self-acceptance. Um,
yeah, we need to
in
promote good behavior.
well, in the sense of, okay, look, like, I get if you have like this gender dysphoria and you're like, I have these breasts and I just cannot, like, I cannot cope, I cannot deal with these things, or body dysmorphia. If you've got that going on, you're like, I just get these things off of me. And it's kind of like, look, if you've got a serious case of that, then, at
But they don't
25,
let
do
you
what
do
you
that.
want.
But they don't let you do that if you are, if it's about anything other than a
Then
sexual issue.
being
So they
trans.
don't let you cut your finger off because you feel like you're not supposed to have a finger. They don't let you cut your arm off because
Right.
of it. So in that sense, I mean, you could argue that you shouldn't let them.
Well,
But
this is how they would, this is part as part of their transition.
so you know
Right.
what? I would even be, man, that would definitely, people would not like to hear this, but I would be a fan of that kind of surgery not being
Done ever.
allowed unless it's a medical concern, like they have, if they have prostate cancer or something, or they have
Yeah.
breast cancer or something. I mean, breast reduction is different. It's whatever. If you have massive honkers that you can't maneuver with, and you
Sure.
get whatever else. So I don't know. I mean, only to be consistent with the principle of you're not allowed to cut your arm off if you want to cut your arm off. I mean, they just do it and then hope they survive, and then the medical tries to save them. But and
Yeah.
I guess you could use the coat hanger argument about this too. You could use the idea of that, like, oh, then people are just going to do their
They're
own
do it
surgeries, and
themselves.
it's going to be or to go to back alleys, and um, I don't know. I mean, like, I don't have a problem with people living their own life, but to have a consistent principle of do we let people do butchery to themselves
Yeah.
because
Well, I
they
think,
feel a certain way? I think we treat the feeling a certain way. We don't indulge the we don't indulge the kind of whatever mess up chemistry or dysphoria that they have with a fake truth in order to fix a problem. What you do is you address the actual dysphoria itself.
yeah, or body
So,
dysmorphia.
like I said, I don't want
Yeah.
anyone to be unhappy. Anyone to be unhappy in life, and I can't imagine having
And
that. It's a
I think what
situation.
we
And I'm
should be
not trying to be
doing,
mean by
yeah,
suggesting that, oh, we shouldn't let you do what you want to do. It's not a matter of that. It's just a matter of is it humane to let someone cut off their arm, or cut off,
their genitals or their
basically
skin their
make it so that
forearm.
they can't have an orgasm ever in their life,
Yeah.
because it happens a majority of the time when you do it very young, and
Yep.
because there's not enough material to even work with,
Yeah.
and it happens a lot when you're older too.
Well, I
So
think what we can aim for is the self-acceptance of, hey, you know what, like if you want to present yourself as a woman, if you want to present yourself as a man, you can do all of this kind of stuff, but and that doesn't, like, you don't have to like disfigure yourself in order to be this other sex,
Yeah.
like to in order to pass in these, like you don't have to remove your genitals, like you don't have to butcher your genitals, you don't have to do that in order to be a trans woman, right? I
If
feel like that's something that
yeah.
is should really be like, because in a sense we kind of have to look at a lot of these things in like stages, almost in like tiers, you know, like, you know, if
Because of the
you're,
serious nature of this conversation, it's hard for me to want to bring up the tweets that we were talking about earlier.
I think we'll get, I think we'll get to them because it's,
Okay.
I mean
Because
that's a
they are a
little
little
more,
more on the brutal, almost
it is
funny
a little more
side, but
brutal.
funny only because it's brutal, but not
Yeah,
because it's actually funny.
it's over the top. I mean, I'll my
That's what
reactions
brought
to
this
it
up.
is,
That's what brought the
yeah,
subject up is these series of tweets by different people, and there's a couple
yeah,
other related stories. So
yeah. But we'll get to those. And I, you know, honestly, I may be largely done with my overall point of just kind of
yeah,
like self acceptance.
that's what I was feeling like. But then I was like, I feel it's kind of weird to say, hey, let's throw this up here, and it just kind of felt like we're actually trying to be honestly like I'm gonna say hard things that are hard that like would definitely people I'd be criticized for, like, oh, you don't let people do their own thing, but like I'm trying to do it with a heart. I'm not trying to be heartless about it all, but then
Well,
you're gonna throw these kind of heartless tweet things up
well, I
here.
guess in a sense, what I, because so my almost my intention when I was looking at these is kind of like I'm almost more interested in personally criticizing the method of how they kind of go about these,
All right.
of how they develop this kind of conversation, and how while I'm not in complete disagreement with them, um,
It is
I
a little
don't
bit
think that this is
it's a little bit
necessarily
brutal
the
to put
best
on
way.
for social media. It definitely generated a response.
Yeah. So I guess I can.
Yep, start with one
I'll
of them.
start with one. So this is one from Tim Pool. I hope that this is, you can read this.
We just read it out loud.
So it's Tim Pool, and he says a neovagina is a surgical wound that will close if not dilated with a medical device. The purpose of a neovagina is for a homosexual male to penetrate for sexual pleasure. This is not disrespectful. This is factual. So, um, yes, he's just kind of like, here's what
He's
it
laying
is.
out the
Here's why
reality
you
of
do
on the
it.
ground. Yeah.
Yeah, here's why you do it. This, there's nothing wrong with this. It is what it is effectively what he's kind of saying.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that there's kind of like certain words, you know, this is a surgical wound. It's like,
Yeah, that's but which is I think stark and real, and I think it's correct. It's correct, but obviously
it's
it could be
too
it has a
much.
negative connotation. Yeah.
A
Like
wound? Like, okay, okay. Like,
I love the depiction because I like
it makes it
candor.
very unattractive, and I think that that's probably what the goal of this is, right, is when you use words like wound, it
Yeah.
signals to people who maybe are thinking about this, and they say a wound. You're saying that the vagina that I want is actually a wound. What? And then there, it's kind of like, maybe it's going to shock them out of it or something like
So,
that.
well, the reason why wound is so applicable is because um, it is very, very common for it to be a constant battle with infections and
Yeah,
seeping and it is trying to treat a wound a lot of times. Like very
it's
few of them get
maintaining the
to a
health of an
place.
open wound.
Yeah, very very few people get to the place to where they have the scar tissue heal over and they have like just skin that is usable as a normal body would be
Hmm.
sexually or whatever otherwise. It's usually like rough and, like I said, seeping and issues constantly with infection, and like where it's like
Yeah.
the body's trying to heal up in ways it doesn't know how to heal. And so it is, when I see that, even though it is brutal, I don't see how it's like he's trying to be factual here to paint a picture of what the actual situation on the ground is if you experience it, if
Yeah.
you go through this. And so because he's presenting it in that way, even though it is brutal and it doesn't shine a good light on what someone may have done with themselves already, I think it's fine. I don't have a problem with this one. This is mild. This is the other ones that we have are yeah, it's pretty brutal.
Sure. And so, I mean, I guess I think that this is, I get the purpose of it, and I understand that we live in a time and a world of extremes where if you want to get something done, you have to take an extreme position on it. And
Yeah.
that way you'll get results that are in your favor. That's just kind of how our society operates, which is, I think, really unhealthy and sucks. But the other aspect of it is that it's for a homosexual male, right? So you're also
You're right.
you're also saying like, okay, you're actually like you've got this you've got this vagina that's actually a wound, and it's for a homosexual male, which means that you are actually a male. So it kind of comes around and just like, it's almost like a snake eating its own tail kind of a thing. It's just like
So
you think that you're a woman when you do this, but you're not, because it's just who
right.
it is there's a homosexual male who now gets this for pleasure.
So I mean, obviously it's 100% true. You're just arguing whether or not it is put up in good
Homosexual.
faith.
I mean, I think the homosexual aspect of it, because you could probably, I'm sure that you could find, if there was a male who
Oh, right. Someone that's just totally
never
accepting of
got,
whatever else. Right. They're
yeah,
not.
who's not attracted to men, doesn't get involved with men ever, is not interested in penises, because they're usually a homosexual male, right? They are actually, I would say, a homosexual male, as part of the requirement is that you're attracted to penis. I feel like that's like the number one thing that makes you
Okay.
a homosexual, right?
Okay.
If you're a male and you're attracted to other men, then it's because
All
they
right.
have a
So
penis,
so
right?
you're saying it's a little bit overly divisive and not actually correct in a lot of cases.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess
Sure.
so, to some degree.
I of course, me being on not the one that would be offended on this because I'm not the target. It
Sure.
doesn't bother me at all. But I guess
I dig into these kinds of things, and I pick things apart. That's kind of
yeah.
almost what I do.
All right, let's just do another one.
So
Let's
the
do another
next
one. I'm
one,
excited.
is this is a harsh
That one.
one.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
this is Tim Pool just
oh
wrote, wow, and he's
yeah,
responding to a definite to something someone posted about a transgender issue, and I don't know what it says.
this
Vulnophilia,
is,
a
yeah,
type of fetish. Vulnophilia refers to being sexually aroused slash turned on by the idea of performing sexual acts on an open wound. Acts such as licking or fucking it. Vulnophilia is derived from the Latin word wound, vulnus, and the Greek word philia, which is commonly used. And this is just a part
it's
of the
cut
picture.
off there, but I don't
So
think.
obviously, I wonder where they got this definition from, since it actually uses the F word in there like that.
Yeah,
And I'm not going to censor it when it's listed in there, but I'm going to try
this
to
is
not.
Urban Dictionary, right?
Oh, Urban
So this is
Dictionary.
largely a made up word that they're kind of using, but
Oh,
these
what the
things are,
this I didn't know
they
this is a
have a
made up word.
purpose.
I thought it was actually because there's like a fear of
Urban
everything, right?
Dictionary is, I'm not going to say that the Urban Dictionary does not have real words. I think that when something gets entered into the Urban Dictionary, and it has, once if a word if a word is made up and a
Yeah,
definition is granted to it, and then
that's true.
when people use that word and they understand that definition, I think it's
Yeah.
I think it's
I think
a
the
win.
point of this is that there are people that do have wound fetishes, but
Yeah.
the knife, that the kind of thing is that, like, obviously people that have wound fetishes, that is not largely what attracts people to trans.
Yeah.
I don't think. I think so. I think that is just more of like a just jabbing a knife in their kidney just because you're being an asshole. So that tweet is
Yeah.
funny because it's also it's also talking about the surgical wound type of idea, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, you can tie it to the trans. You can easily make that link, right? So this is
yeah,
all kind of like, this is a pile on of
yes, exactly.
terminologies in order to dissuade people, right? So then there's this one, which is what Jordan Peterson then responded to,
Yeah,
and he says, "What is a woman? A gay boy with a surgical wound created for the sole purpose of another man's pleasure. Acceptance of that definition has been made mandatory by law." So this, and then he's got this crazy picture
he's got a crazy picture of a clown from
of
like
it,
some horror movie.
from it. Yeah.
It.
This one, I think, Jordan Peterson
He has started
he
saying more. I don't disagree
this
with
isn't
him.
professor. This is not like
Right.
Professor Jordan Peterson or
Thank you.
Dr.
Yes.
Jordan
That's what
Peterson.
I'm saying, is that, like, he's been posting things on Twitter that are not very professor like, and that's my only criticism. It's not that it isn't correct. It's like, hey,
This doesn't help his image. This
yes,
does not help
exactly.
his image, I don't
And
think.
so that's my criticism. It's not that it isn't correct, but it's like it's not being. I think that Jordan Peterson is better on the issue when he's being more professor like.
Yeah.
He
So,
can clinically eviscerate different ideas without just sounding petty.
yeah. So then the other one.
Oh, yeah. And Tim Pool responded to that with he said, like
Yeah, he says
yeah,
he said,
saw that tweet.
wow, this is
Go back one more. Yeah.
Woke up today and chose violence, and I was like, yeah.
Dr. Peterson woke up and chose violence.
Yeah. And it's like, whoa, okay. And I feel like the environment is, and who am I? Like, here's one of the things is like, who am I to judge, right, on these kinds of things? Because I just went through the whole Trump era, and I went through all this stuff of people saying the most crazy, heinous, awful things, reframing, abusing language to the maximum degree.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time where, like, if you didn't agree with me, you were a Nazi. If you didn't agree with me, you're a white supremacist.
You're saying this is kind of like propaganda.
You're a racist.
This is like propaganda-ish, like
yeah.
I
think so, and it's kind of a way. It's a bit different. Like, this isn't.
I think
this
it
is
does
more.
It does taint our argument when you have stuff like this in there. It makes. I mean, even though we agree with the sentiment behind all this, there is a decorum and stuff that you should have.
It makes it harder to have the actual conversation so that you can make progress, right? Because that's what happened during the Trump era. Was like, I would just kind of be like, hey, let's have a conversation about this. Like, let's try to talk this out like reasonable, rational people. And they'd be like, F you, Nazi. And it was like, can you explain to me what a position is that I have that makes me a Nazi? Well,
racist.
That's
the easiest things. They'll just use the easiest arguments, and then you have to say like 7 paragraphs in order to refute them, and they're not interested.
Yeah, and it made it so that you couldn't even really have the conversation. But I think that, and it was to largely dissuade other people from engaging into conversation with you, right? And it's disassociate from this person because they're a bad person, right? And I think what these ones are doing is these are more or less kind of saying, we're going to paint a horrific image for you so that you do not engage in not like don't engage in the conversation, right, but so that you don't engage in this ideology
challenged.
Well, no, it's that they don't want, like, this is basically saying it's such harsh language that they want to dissuade people from falling into the ideology because they don't want to be looked at as having oh, I missed, it's all gone. They don't
A
want to be
wound.
looked at as having um a wound, right?
Yeah.
Like if like so that's the extreme position that they're taking in order to dissuade people. And so I don't think that it's helpful for the conversation that we were having earlier on. Like earlier on, the conversation we were having was much more productive. We were getting, we're getting somewhere. We're expressing ideas. We're
Yeah.
feeling things out. We're kind of like, I don't know about this, but this is kind of just how I feel at the moment, and we're taking it more seriously. But then you have things like this, and I mean, this is just such a
This is just a Twitter meme. This is, I
yeah,
mean, it's not. It's real, but
this is such a silly and ridiculous
I'm
thing
gonna
to
explain the
see.
picture. So there's a picture, and the person says, "I'm sorry, but what the fuck is this?" Or "What WTF?" Right? And there's a picture of a podium at some sort of um
British Canadian
yeah, yeah,
official
queer
event.
event. It's some sort of
Yeah.
queer event, and it says protect 2S LGBTQI plus communities. So now they're putting prefixes on the
I
LGBTQ.
don't even know what the
It's like 2S.
2S
What is
is.
2S?
I have no idea. And what's interesting is that it used to be LGBTQIA
Yes,
plus.
IA2 plus. It used to be IA2 plus, so maybe that's where that two's from.
I never this is the first time I've ever seen two. And so like this is a huge
It's
I
two
feel like
spirit.
this is a
It's
huge
for two
problem.
spirit. It's for two
Oh,
spirit.
two spirit.
Yeah.
And so two spirit, is
It's
that
stupid
like
that I know.
I don't know if that's like that allows you to be an animal as well as the human. Like
Um,
I can be a wolf and I can be a man.
I don't know the classification. I just know that that's what it's called. It's called two spirit for that.
It,
I,
you
now,
know,
now, if now I don't know what the plus is for. It's just
plus
basically
is just
anyone
everything
with
else that we
yes,
don't want to
anything
that's
queer.
not important enough
Yes,
to
well,
talk about,
or
right?
it's even more marginally small than what's already out there. So yeah.
I feel like this is actually I'm not gay or I'm not in any of these communities or anything, but I feel like this should be really offensive to the LGB community because
Yeah.
the lesbians, gays, and bisexuals, they went through a lot of work. They did a lot of work in order to get to where they got, right? In order to be able to get married and be able to do and have sexual relationships with whoever they wanted to, right? And for that to just be socially acceptable. They went through a lot. And then you add trans into this, and the trans is completely separate from LGB. Trans is more identity based. It's an internal self reflection of how you feel on the inside and that you want to express it on the outside. So it has nothing to do with sexual attraction. It has nothing to do with sexuality. It has nothing to do with any of that stuff. And so then now you add so that's an intrusion on the whole on the queer or
Mhm.
on the LGB um, group, right? Boom. So now you have this one, and then you have queer, which is basically just like everything else. Here, I'm gonna stop sharing because I think we get the
Yeah.
point. Um, but I think that we have all of this. The queer is kind of like it's everything else that's just kind of not normal. I guess. I mean, if once you have
It's not of the
Q,
standard whatever.
it's
They wouldn't want to use the word normal, but yes, it's anything that is not the traditional way of doing things.
sure. Which I mean, okay, then Q is really all that you need then because
Yeah.
you have
Exactly.
LGBTI2S
Yeah, they
plus
don't
whatever. All of that ends up fitting within the Q, but LGB has become more normalized and more accepted, right? So societally, and so it's kind of like I feel like they should just kind of be on their own kind of a thing and they should really just end up tamping down largely everything like having a whole month of pride and then you have these parades
Yeah,
going on.
they have
It gets
it's
silly.
always. I think this is
But
Pride Month, right? Isn't this
I thought it
month?
was like I don't
I
know
don't know.
anymore.
It's
But then you
there's
have,
always something going on.
but I feel like it's even more offensive now because then they're adding 2S on top of this, and it's kind of like, you know, LGB is kind of like they're kind of the ones that are
Oh, the
caught
2S.
holding the bag.
You know what? The 2S, I bet you that's Two Spirit, and I bet you they are taking two letters for one thing. They're like absorbed. They're even
And
getting
they're in
more.
the front.
Yeah. I
They're
didn't
in the
think about the
front
idea
of it,
that I knew
right?
that two is for Two Spirit, but it's 2S. That's probably what it is. It's probably Two Spirit with the two and the S. Normally the S used to be. I mean, the two was later and there was no S, but now they did 2S. That's almost like it's almost like there's someone a part
Yeah,
of
it's
this
Two
group
Spirit.
that is a Two Spirit themselves, and so they decided to front and center it on top of
And
everything.
then look at this character back here.
Yeah,
Like, look at this. Here you have somebody who's largely normal,
yeah.
appears largely normalish,
And you have
right?
someone
Just
back there that looks like they're
like an
getting ready for
older
a Kiss
lady.
concert.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, and then look at this, and the outfit is like, okay, is this like why isn't there a D on
Right.
here now?
And the Asian lady up front that's just dressed more like a man. Okay. That's like that's like
Yeah,
operating in society and being fine. But like when you have people that want to make it so like the queerness is important. The more vivacious and different it is, like the more validated they feel.
and I think that this it to me, I feel like it really sucks for the LGB communities or
To
community.
be to have a clown show
They're
sometimes around them.
yeah, they're being lumped in, like, here's like
And I
as
say
if,
clown
oh,
show because the person is dressed like a clown behind, and
it's
not because they're all not because all people that are trans are complete clowns.
to me, it's Dave Chappelle kind of came up with something probably very similar to this, but it's kind of like, you know, you've got LGB are driving a car, and then here comes the trans, and then here comes a queer person, and here comes a Two Spirit, and here comes the intersex person, here comes the pansexual, here comes this, and it's like, you know, where before it was just three people in a car driving down the road, now when they stop and it's like, okay, it's time to get out, it's not three people getting out of the car anymore, it's like 72 or how, and
Yeah.
it's an infinite number of people who are getting out because then you're going to end up roping in all of the non-binaries, which has an unlimited number. So it like they're turning the car into a clown car, and here's your it's right in front of your face.
Unfortunately,
This is a clown.
the uniting principle between all of this is that as an individual make up the rules. so like therefore they can be unified in the fact that they all make up their own rules, and so
Yeah.
it's so like
And then they want everybody else to play by their rules.
Yes.
And it's like, you know, at some point, like I can only be so generous with my thoughts in how I'm going to operate with you.
So granted that if either one of us encounters someone in real life that is any of these characters on the screen there, we treat them with human decency. But when we're talking in a space here, aspirationally and what the consequences are and thinking and talking it out loud, yes, we're going to talk like, oh, that person's
this is a clown show.
Right.
If I have to work with this person, like, sure. You know, it's a professional level,
right? You treat
if I have a friend and I go over to their house and this person shows up, I'll have a regular normal conversation. If they wanted to be like, oh, you know, I'm a Two Spirit
something,
whatever. I mean, it's like I'm a clown person. My pronouns are clown them or whatever. Like, like, you know, at some point it's kind of like, you know, I'm not interested in playing this game anymore. Like,
I mean, I
I'll
would
treat
tell
you
them,
like a normal person so long as we're having a normal interaction.
yeah,
Perfectly fine.
yes.
But
But
if
if they're trying to
I'm
be outlandish, if they're trying if they're trying to,
if they want to have the conversation, I'll have the conversation.
yes. Oh
But
yeah. And if they're asking to have the serious conversation, I'll talk just same way I've been
yeah,
talking with you about it to them. But I'm not gonna bring it up. We don't have to bring up everything we see just because we talk. You know, if I see trans person, I got to talk to you about how wrong your choices
yeah.
are. I'm
I
not
don't
gonna.
have
That's
interest. I
that's
don't have any
ridiculous.
interest in that.
You like who am I? Who am I to say that to them? We're talking about general theory about society as a whole and how it would be run best, and that's kind of where we're at with our talking. And it's not a matter like individuals are still individuals that still need to be loved by um by other people and things, and like they I mean like we don't love everybody equally because we don't love everyone equally despite what they do. Actions matter. So like if you're a horrible person, you don't deserve to be loved by everyone just as equally as if you're a good person. So
Sure.
so yes, we treat people based upon what they do, and it's whatever. I mean, I just don't think that it's good. It's like what we are is we are in a place of what's it called? Bone Arrow Girl movies,
Oh, Hunger Games.
Hunger Games. Hunger Games. When you have the one or whatever the main city is, the main capital city,
Yeah.
they're all in in crazy outfits and crazy outlandish because what it is once you have everything, what you start doing is self-exploration, getting weird, getting as weird as you can and getting as unique as you can. And that's where your whole focus is inventing a unique identity and being all this different thing. And so like because they have nothing else to worry about, I feel like this is a first world problem. I feel like you don't encounter
Oh,
this
absolutely. Yeah.
in countries where you have to worry about getting food. Like you don't
Yeah.
encounter this. We're like, hey, identify like how about like if you're worried about getting food or worried about energy, you're worried about having enough to feed your kids or things, you don't have this. So this is unfortunately is because we're so prosperous that people have the mind space to just go all in on different concepts like this.
Yeah. I think you have to be either like seriously traumatized and now are seeking attention, or I mean it's almost to go through with these kinds of things and like pushing like or super privileged.
Yeah.
Like these people are either traumatized and then they act out to do this kind of crazy stuff
To fit in somewhere, or
to
they're
fit in
super
somewhere,
privileged
or
and they want
and then
to
they
be.
also have a hyper
Yeah,
level of privilege that allows them to even do this
yeah.
kind of stuff. I mean, I look at this and it just looks crazy. It looks ridiculous. This is one of the silliest things, and I really think that the LGBT community should disassociate themselves with
With
all of
all the
this
extra,
nonsense.
because
Yeah,
everything is
because
extra.
it's like, look, you guys, like the LGBs, like you guys have it. You guys got it exactly what you want. Why are you letting these crazies piggyback
Hijack
on
it.
top of all your stuff? Like, let the trans have their own community. Let them work things out on their own. They're not like they're piggybacking off of all the effort and all the work, and they're trying to associate it as if this is it's the same thing. Hey, any argument that you made against the LGBs is just the same one that we already had these arguments with the LGBs. Like we're just apply that logic that failed
Yeah,
to the trans, and it's like, well, that it's a completely different thing. We're not
yeah,
talking about the same thing at all. And then you have queer and
yeah,
inner whatever it is. I don't know if it's intersectional,
yeah. It's
interrelation,
intersex. I have
intersex. Like
intersex.
now we have two spirit. It's like I saw this one.
So I
I saw this one where it's this guy, and he's like, "Yeah, I've always thought that I was a dog," and so he has this his wife is like, okay, I'll accept that. And so now he dresses up like a Dalmatian. She treats him like a dog all the time. She gives him treats, and she's like, and he's like, yeah, I'm happy. It's like, okay,
So
if you want to do that,
I have a quick
okay,
we do
but
need
don't expect me to be like, hey puppy, how you doing? Like, don't expect me to
there's
treat
there's no way. There is,
like an
however,
actual dog. All right.
I was listening to Joe Rogan, and unfortunately, he's highlighted to me something that exists in reality, like in West Virginia somewhere. There is a guy that only barks, and he's actually mentally incapable of communicating otherwise, and it's a real thing. It's like a podcast or it's something where he went and it was, and it is, they're in
They're in another world.
they're yeah, the
And
family
don't
is,
expect me to treat that person like they're an actual dog.
well, the thing is that they are,
Mentally disabled.
so
Severely
they
mentally
are in,
disabled.
I don't want to say, I don't like, there has to be another word for white trash area, but basically they're in a very low income West Virginia, like out in the outskirts situation of where they grew up a certain
Sure.
way and they have no view. I don't know what's a neutral term for like white trash type of idea, the typical idea. Because I'm not trying to, I don't want to say, is there even
So
one?
this sounds like some inbred type shit. Like,
Yeah, it is kind of. It is
I
basically.
don't want to
that
say
type of
like
thing.
white trash or necessarily, but it's just like some.
Yeah.
I don't think whatever the situation is with this person, wherever they came from, however they got
There's a
there,
family. There's a family, and they all support him and stuff like that. But like I don't know how it happened that way, but he's
is this
incapable.
like what they
He is
enable
mentally,
this?
huh?
Like, do they was the
Did
did they start like when he was born and like grew up, like when he was like
I
8
don't
years old, was
I
he
don't
just
remember. We
going
were
around barking?
listening to Joe Rogan show about that though. So unfortunately, he's probably the only one in the world like this. I mean, fortunately, but I mean, unfortunately, it does exist, and I think it's a 100% real thing. And the whole town is very protective of people that are coming in because they don't want to go, oh, take a picture of this dog guy or something like that, right? It's like the whole town keeps everyone away, probably because they know that the family where this is the case, they're just not quite right. But you don't need to harass the guy, you know. So it's a sad situation. But anyways, I wouldn't have known about it except for Joe Rogan somehow knew about it and he was talking
It's
to a guest about it.
ridiculous. And they probably should just like, keep that shit to yourself. Like,
Yeah.
because if you're
In
trying
this
to
case, it's not
rope me in on
identifying
it,
as it's for some reason some mental thing, and he didn't have any friends except for dogs, and he decided he wanted to develop that way. It sounds like it's more like that rather than a self identity crisis. So that just sounds like a random situation. Self identity crisis, where like I said, there is a place where I deliver to, which the person, I haven't seen them in a long time now. It's been a couple months. There is a person that refers to themselves as Elf and Elf Self. A very
yeah.
attractive girl, very thin girl, but I'm not sure if her ears are shaved, but they're pointy. There might be some sort of prosthetic that is done really well where I can't tell. They're pointy ears. An otherwise very attractive girl, probably 22, 24, somewhere in that range, just at the front of a desk.
I mean, that's
That's a pronoun.
that's
Elf and
fitting
elf self.
somebody's
And
fetish. I'll tell
luckily,
you
I
right
never even
now.
have to say anything.
That's fit.
I just deliver and I say, all right, have a good day. And I leave. I
Yep.
don't, but I know for sure because I've had a conversation with a coworker for like a half hour about it. And I don't want to.
You know what's weird about that though is elves, like being an elf, elves are either male or female. So having your pronouns be elf and elf self,
Yes, that is interesting.
it doesn't really make
To
any
be a
sense.
race instead of a, right.
Yeah.
Being a race instead of a sex.
It's like I'm white self. My pronouns are white self. Like,
yeah, it'd be the same type of thing.
What would I like? You can have normal, regular conversations with these people, but I feel like they put no real time and effort or brain power into thinking out logically these kinds of things, because they just like, once you just kind of consider just certain levels of these things, like it doesn't make sense. and they're
It
only
doesn't
just on
have to make sense.
occasion.
And in her case, she won't suffer any consequences because she's
Everybody's treating her just like the dog,
she's like no, she's like 5'2" and
and
80
people want to
pounds
bang
and
her.
gorgeous. And so
People want to
therefore
bang her.
people were like,
It's a
sure,
fetish.
lady, sure, elf self, come home with me. Like they're not. I mean, it's not going to matter. People are gonna give her everything she wants because she's beautiful.
And she's effectively objectifying herself.
Yeah.
In effect.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe that may not be her intention.
People, I'm sure guys will give her any pronoun she wants, because they have an objective.
Yeah.
in hand.
But she's gonna have a hard time settling down with somebody, who's not a super weirdo, because that's a fetish.
It is. And people are allowed to have fetishes, but it's weird that we allow them in public. It just, you're a desk clerk and you can just be that. It's like,
yeah, it's bizarre.
I mean, it's one thing if it's a back office and another thing if it's in a front desk. So, I mean,
And the only reason she's up there is because she's attractive. Like that's it.
I haven't seen her in a couple months, and I was looking forward to seeing if it was just a phase or something, because he was like that for a year or so of me delivering. So
it's, like I said in the beginning, this trans topic is getting wild.
Yeah.
So I think this is a good time to end it. We're 11 minutes over. My
lighting is crazy today. My camera's just flickering. That's why I was adjusting early on. I did buy some lights that hopefully they're like a nice light strip now that will and I can choose the color of if it's white like it's right now from the sunlight, or if it's nice and yellow like yours. Like I think I can change it to yellow, which is what I prefer.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, if you made it this far, drop a like. If you enjoyed the content, hit the subscribe. And if you really enjoyed it, you want to catch us when we drop these, hit the bell icon, and we try to get these things out 3 days a week. We missed yesterday, but I think today was a banger. So I hope this one makes up for it.
All right.
Later, guys.